think he'll change. He is committed of his own level of service, and that will remain.
The royal family has mastered an art form that few institutions can maintain: absolute, impenetrable silence. Never complain, never explain. It's the code that has protected the monarchy for generations. But what happens when that code is shattered from within? Just days ago, following the explosive release of photographs that have sent shockwaves through the international community, sources close to Buckingham Palace report that Princess Anne has finally spoken. Not to the press, not to the public, but to the inner circle. And her message was devastating in its simplicity. The dossier exists, and we tried to tell him. Those 11 words have allegedly reduced Prince Harry to tears in his Montecito mansion. Because if they're true, everything he thought he knew about his life, his marriage, and his family's so-called betrayal has been turned completely upside down. Today we're investigating what may be the most consequential royal intelligence failure in modern history. What you're about to hear challenges everything the mainstream media has told you about Harry and Meghan's love story. The question isn't whether Prince Harry made a mistake. The question is, did Princess Anne try to save him from a catastrophe that she could see coming from miles away? Don't click away. The evidence we're about to present demands your attention. The vetting that changed everything. Let's rewind to autumn 2016. The leaves are falling in London, and Prince Harry is falling in love. Standard royal protocol kicks into gear. Level 3 security vetting by palace officers. Normally, this is routine. A check for outstanding debts, criminal records, embarrassing associations. A formality, really. But with Meghan Markle, something different happened. Something that made alarm bells ring not just in the palace security office, but deep within British intelligence services. Think about that for a moment. What could a cable television actress have in her background that would trigger intelligence community red flags? According to palace insiders, the vetting process revealed something that no PR team could explain away. A glaring, impossible contradiction. Between 2008 and 2012, Meghan publicly described herself as a struggling actress, barely surviving in the brutal Hollywood audition circuit. Her documented income came from minor roles and brief appearances. She held briefcases on game shows. She played forgettable characters in forgettable episodes. This was her public narrative. The struggling artist, the underdog, the woman who would eventually inspire millions with her rags-to-royalty story. But the surveillance data told a completely different story. The intelligence report allegedly placed this struggling actress on Mediterranean super yachts worth tens of millions of dollars. It documented her presence at exclusive gatherings where a single night costs more than most people earn in a year. It showed her circulating through the closed, invitation-only circles of Gulf elites and Middle Eastern power brokers. Princess Anne, known throughout the palace for her no-nonsense approach and deep connections to the security establishment, was reportedly among the first senior royals to read the file, and what she saw made her blood run cold. She looked at the timeline. She looked at the finances. She looked at the travel logs. And then she asked the question that Harry refused to ask. Who paid for all of this? Because here's what you need to understand. Struggling actresses don't casually float through elite international power spaces without massive financial backing. Someone covered the travel. Someone covered the access. Someone facilitated her presence in rooms where billionaires make deals that reshape nations. The dossier suggested something that would shatter Harry's romantic fantasy. Meghan Markle wasn't struggling during those years. She was being sponsored, and in the intelligence world, unexplained wealth or unexplained access is the single biggest red flag for a security compromise. Princess Anne understood something that Harry, in his romantic haze, couldn't see. These weren't random invitations to glamorous parties. This was systematic cultivation. When you see the same person appearing repeatedly in the same elite circles over multiple years, despite having no apparent means to afford such a lifestyle, intelligence analysts start connecting dots. They start asking uncomfortable questions about patronage, obligation, and what exactly is being exchanged for all that access. The palace security team would have cross-referenced travel records, financial statements, and photographic evidence. They would have mapped out her social network, identifying the common denominators. And what they found was a pattern that stretched from California to the Mediterranean, from Monaco to the Middle East, all funded by sources that didn't appear on any tax return. The confrontation that broke a family. This brings us to a meeting that reportedly destroyed the relationship between aunt and nephew forever. A confrontation that Harry would later describe as proof of his family's cruelty, but which Princess Anne saw as her last desperate attempt to protect him. Can you imagine being in Anne's position? You're holding a classified intelligence report. You're looking at your nephew, madly in love, planning a wedding that will be watched by billions. And you know something he doesn't. You know that the woman he's about to marry fits a very specific profile that intelligence analysts have been tracking for decades. Anne didn't sit Harry down to lecture him about class, race, or royal protocol. She sat him down to talk about national security. She allegedly laid the Saudi dossier on the table and pointed to a term used by intelligence analysts: strategic social placement. Let me explain what that means, because it's crucial to understanding everything that follows. In elite power circles, particularly those connected to Gulf states and international oligarchs, attractive, intelligent, socially adept individuals are sometimes deliberately placed in proximity to high-value targets. Not through crude espionage tactics, but through sophisticated social engineering. You're invited to the right parties, introduced to the right people, given access to the right rooms. And you're there because someone believes you can serve a function, socially, relationally, or reputationally. Princess Anne reportedly explained this to Harry in blunt terms. She told him that the photos in the dossier showed someone who wasn't stumbling into these spaces by accident or luck. They showed someone who was comfortable, someone who understood the hierarchy, someone who knew exactly how to navigate rooms filled with some of the world's most powerful and dangerous men. Her warning was chillingly precise. She hasn't just been dating you, Harry. She's been kept, and people don't keep you around in these circles unless you're useful. But Harry, blinded by what he believed was destiny, refused to look at the evidence. He saw a victim of press persecution. Anne saw a beneficiary of the shadow market. He famously declared, "What Meghan wants, Meghan gets." He viewed the dossier not as protection, but as an insult, as proof that his family was racist, classist, and determined to sabotage his happiness. And so he buried the report. He ignored the receipts. He walked directly into what Princess Anne had identified as a trap. The tragedy of this moment cannot be overstated. Princess Anne wasn't acting out of snobbery or prejudice. She was acting out of experience. As a working royal for over 5 decades, she had seen countless individuals attempt to infiltrate the royal circle for personal gain. She understood the sophisticated methods used by those seeking to leverage royal connections for financial or political advantage. She had developed an instinct for identifying people whose motivations didn't align with their stated intentions. And everything in that dossier triggered those instincts. The impossible lifestyle, the Gulf connections, the strategic positioning, the carefully curated public persona that didn't match the private reality. These weren't the hallmarks of an innocent romance. They were the hallmarks of a long-term operation. The question I want you to consider is this: was Princess Anne being cruel, or was she being accurate? The impossible math. Let's talk about money. Because while romance is beautiful, Finances don't lie. Between 2008 and 2012, Meghan Markle's official resume lists minor acting roles, brief television appearances, and short-term gigs. She was not an A-lister. She wasn't even a B-lister. She was a working-class actor in Los Angeles, hustling for auditions, worrying about rent, taking whatever work she could get. Her most notable job during this period? Holding a briefcase on Deal or No Deal. Her salary? Reportedly around $800 per episode. Now let's look at the other side of the ledger. The newly leaked photographs place her on yachts worth tens of millions of dollars, private gatherings in Monaco, Mediterranean circuits where the guests include Saudi princes, Russian oligarchs, and international financiers, events where the champagne alone costs more per bottle than a month's rent in Hollywood. Do you see the problem? The math simply doesn't work. Cable television roles don't fund Monaco summers. Holding a briefcase doesn't bankroll Mediterranean yacht circuits. A struggling actress's salary doesn't cover first-class international travel, designer wardrobes, and access to the most exclusive social events on Earth. Let's break down the actual numbers because this is where the dossier becomes irrefutable. A first-class flight from Los Angeles to Monaco in 2010 would have cost approximately $8,000 to $12,000. The hotels in Monaco during Grand Prix season or the yacht show? Minimum $1,000 per night, often much more. Designer evening wear appropriate for these events? $5,000 to $20,000 per outfit. Hair, makeup, accessories, another few thousand. We're talking about expenses that would easily exceed $50,000 for a single week in Monaco. And the photographs show this wasn't a one-time occurrence. This was a pattern that repeated across multiple years and multiple locations. Someone was covering these costs. Someone was facilitating this access. And that someone expected something in return. Because, as Princess Anne reportedly told Harry, power never gives without expecting something back. This is where the story stops being about romance and starts being about transactions. In the world of Gulf elites and international oligarchs, these relationships follow a very specific pattern. Access is currency, beauty is leverage, and discretion is the price of admission. The intelligence assessment likely concluded that Meghan wasn't just getting lucky with a few party invites. The photos span multiple years. This wasn't opportunistic. It was systematic. It wasn't help. It was support. It wasn't an opportunity. It was an investment. The financial forensics would have been damning. Bank records that didn't show large withdrawals for these trips. No credit card bills for luxury hotels. No receipts for designer gowns. Which means someone else was paying. Someone else was booking. Someone else was ensuring she had everything she needed to look the part and play the role. In intelligence terms, this is called being handled. You don't pay your own way because you can't afford to. Someone with resources handles your expenses, your travel, your wardrobe, your access. And in return, you provide something they value: your presence, your discretion, your ability to facilitate introductions, your willingness to be seen with the right people in the right places. And here's the terrifying question that Princess Anne posed to Harry. The question he couldn't answer then and can't answer now. What was the return on that investment supposed to be? The handler in plain sight. If the yachts were the stage, then Marcus Anderson was the director. For years, the mainstream media painted Marcus simply as Meghan's best friend, a charming consultant for the Soho House empire, a loyal confidant. But in the classified files of the Palace vetting report, he was viewed very differently. Princess Anne allegedly identified him not as a companion, but as a handler. Why would British intelligence use such a loaded term? Let's examine the evidence. Marcus Anderson was the global membership director of Soho House. an exclusive private members club network that serves as a nexus point for celebrities, financiers, and international power brokers. But his real skill wasn't hospitality. It was connections. He knew who to introduce to whom. He understood how to facilitate relationships that benefited all parties involved. And in 2015, the year before Meghan met Harry, Anderson orchestrated what may have been the most important event of her pre-royal life: the grand opening of Soho House, Istanbul. Why does Istanbul matter? Because it sits at the crossroads of East and West. It's where European sophistication meets Middle Eastern capital. It's where deals get made that never appear in any official record. Intelligence sources suggest that this wasn't just a glamorous party. It was a marketplace. A carefully curated environment where talent mixed with capital, where ambitious individuals were introduced to wealthy patrons who could open doors. The Dossier likely flagged that Meghan was introduced at this event to a specific network of Middle Eastern financiers and Gulf power brokers, the exact same network that would later be connected to those yacht photographs. What makes the Istanbul connection so significant is the timing. This event happened in 2015, just months before she would be introduced to Prince Harry. It represents the culmination of nearly a decade of careful cultivation within these elite circles. By this point, she would have been fully integrated into the network. She would have understood the unspoken rules, the expectations, the way these relationships work. Istanbul was likely her graduation ceremony, a signal to the network that she was ready for the next level, that she could be trusted with higher-profile connections, that she understood how to navigate these waters without making waves. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. We're told that Harry and Meghan met on a blind date in London in 2016, orchestrated by a mutual friend. That friend was Marcus Anderson.
The palace in crisis. The immediate aftermath of Princess Anne's revelation can only be described as controlled chaos. Within minutes, Buckingham Palace issued a terse statement calling Anne's allegations categorically false and deeply irresponsible. But notice what they didn't do. They didn't threaten legal action. They didn't call her delusional or attention-seeking. They chose their words very, very carefully. Why? Because Princess Anne is not some easily dismissed outsider. She's not a tabloid journalist. When people issue non-denial denials, it usually means they're worried about being proven wrong. The legal situation is particularly complex. If Andrew did share confidential information about royal operations without authorization, did he violate any laws or agreements? Palace lawyers are undoubtedly exploring this question, but legal action against a member of the royal family, Meghan's team, has been more aggressive, calling Anne's claims complete fantasy and desperate attention-seeking. But again, notice the strategy. They're attacking Anne's credibility and motivation, rather than providing specific denials of specific allegations. But both denials have been carefully worded in ways that leave room for interpretation. Andrew's lawyers released a statement saying Anne's characterization is misleading and taken out of context, but notably didn't deny all contact with Meghan. That phrasing is significant. Taken out of context suggests that something happened, but that Anne's interpretation is wrong. Or a disgruntled former employee. She's the Princess Royal. She's served the crown with distinction for over 50 years. She's completed more royal engagements than virtually any other family member for the past decade. You can't just wave away her credibility. Behind the scenes, the response has been far more desperate. According to sources close to the palace, King Charles immediately convened emergency meetings with senior courtiers and legal advisors. The questions being asked are both practical and existential. What exactly does Anne have? Until they know the full extent of her evidence, they can't craft an adequate response. How do we contain this? With social media and 24-hour news cycles, the story is already spreading globally. Traditional palace strategies of controlled messaging aren't working. What do we do about Andrew and Meghan? Both have issued their own denials.
Legal proceedings underway. Just 72 hours after King Charles's private announcement, the Royal Legal Council convened in emergency session to begin the unprecedented task of dismantling a monarch's marriage. They must address titles, housing arrangements, access to royal funds, public responsibilities, and succession implications. This isn't just a divorce, has been tasked with navigating legal territory that hasn't been explored in centuries. The terms being drafted are extraordinarily complex. The lead solicitor, Sir Gavin Morland, one of Britain's most respected constitutional lawyers. The current draft would allow Camilla to retain the title Queen Consort Emerita, a ceremonial designation that sounds impressive, but carries absolutely no political weight or succession rights. She would live there as a private citizen, not as royalty. Perhaps most consequential of all, the travel funding and staff support currently provided through the sovereign grant would cease within 90 days of the finalized separation. In practical terms, Camilla is being systematically separated from every material benefit of being queen consort. It's a constitutional puzzle with no modern precedent. It is, in fact, the first time since the Royal Marriages Act of 1772 that legal advisors have interpreted divorce proceedings for a reigning sovereign. But there's another clause being drafted, one that speaks to the deep mistrust now permeating this situation. Palace legal teams are crafting a strict non-disclosure provision that would prevent Camilla from publishing or contributing to any books, articles, films, or media projects that reference the royal family without explicit pre-approval. But while lawyers prepared documents in studious silence, the outside world erupted with reaction. In the court of public opinion, the verdict came swiftly, and Diana's memory returned like thunder through the halls of Windsor. He has made one specific request, that all proceedings conclude before the royal tour season begins in March. He wants this resolved, finalized, and behind them so the monarchy can reset its public face without the constant distraction of personal scandal. This isn't just a legal undoing, one insider noted. It's the final chapter of a story that began in the shadows over 50 years ago. It's essentially a title without power, a name without meaning. More significantly, Camilla would be stripped of access to Duchy of Cornwall funds, the vast estate that provides income to the royal family. She would also be removed from Crown Estate privileges, cutting her off from the financial infrastructure that supported her royal lifestyle. Her housing arrangement would be permanently fixed at Raymill House, which, critically, is not an official royal residence. Financial penalties for breach? Up to £5 million. This clause was reportedly insisted upon by Prince William himself. As one source close to his communications team put it, no more shaping history to suit her agenda. Charles, according to aides, is compliant but emotionally fragile throughout this process. He's been present for legal briefings, but his focus remains divided between duty and personal devastation.
Prince William's shocking announcement. The day began like a typical royal morning in Kensington Palace. According to unnamed palace sources, it was precisely 7:48 in the morning. The palace released a statement through its official channels. Within seconds, aides inside the palace knew this was not routine. The statement did not come from an office, a spokesperson, or a committee. It came directly from Prince William himself. That detail alone changed everything. Unlike typical palace announcements, there was no formality. In a move that caught palace observers off guard, Prince William announced the complete and permanent end to any future relationship between the Crown and the Duchess of Sussex. There was no room left for reinterpretation, no space for reconciliation stories, and no language that suggested a chance for review. It closed a door that many believed would never fully shut, careful not to speculate beyond what the statement allowed. The line had been drawn, but its shadow stretched forward. As the day moved on, people's attention slowly began to drift toward the reason behind William's action. People wanted to understand how such a decision was prepared, who was consulted, and how long it had been coming. Stick around, because you are about to find out what triggered William. The BBC reported the news. Sky News followed. ITV cut into morning shows. In the United States, CNN pushed an alert banner across its screen. By 8 o'clock, the story had replaced financial updates, weather segments, and entertainment news across major networks. Veteran reporters like Nicholas Witchell, who has covered the monarchy for decades, described the moment as something he had never seen in his career. International media moved fast. Reuters distributed a breaking bulletin within 4 minutes. In France, Le Monde updated its homepage headline before most commuters reached work. But the press reaction is nothing compared to social media. Data from CrowdTangle showed over 1 million interactions across platforms within the first 10 minutes. On X, the topic reached #1 worldwide in under 8 minutes. But it wasn't just about the message. It was the timing that really mattered. Keep watching, because we are about to reveal everything you need to know about William's shocking decision. The timing of the release matters a lot. It was 7:48 in the morning, which meant it hit breakfast television in Britain, afternoon newsrooms in Asia, and late-night desks in North America all at once. That timing ensured there was no quiet window, no soft rollout. Within 3 minutes, that combination unsettled everybody. Although analysts believe that the financial markets did not move dramatically after the announcement, there were some disruptions. The pound remained stable, though shares tied to British media companies saw brief spikes in trading volume as people raced to view the announcement. Public reaction across the world was not the same, though. In the United Kingdom, YouGov Snap polling later that day showed a sharp divide by age. Now, this is a shocker. People all over the globe already sensed that the Crown and the Sussexes weren't on good terms through interviews, documentaries, court filings, and media commentary. Those episodes were messy, emotional, and often reactive. This announcement was neither emotional nor reactive. It was administrative in tone but personal in origin. And guess what? Yeah, most went unanswered, not due to overload, but by design. Silence became part of the message. The institution had spoken, and the decision is not up for debate. By early afternoon, the story had shifted from what happened to what comes next. Commentators began asking how this would affect future coronation planning, charitable patronages, and media strategy. Legal analysts discussed the implications for titles, funding, and representation. Older citizens largely viewed the decision as overdue and necessary for the stability of the institution. But the younger folks were not particularly happy with the finality of William's decision. Aside from that, William's decision not to give a direct speech also mattered. There were no emotional appeals, no personal grievances aired, no reference to past interviews or allegations. By avoiding that, there was no immediate counter to William's announcement. Media outlets had facts to report, but little to dissect. That vacuum meant commentators could only analyze structure, precedent, and consequence, not personalities. But according to royal historians, William's decision is nothing new or surprising. For instance, the palace removed Her Royal Highness from Diana's name following her famous divorce from Charles back in 1996. But others were quick to counter that even then, communication was handled through government channels rather than personal declaration. No one could recall a moment when a future king personally authored such a declaration. As the news spread, embassies reached out to the palace for clarifications. According to a source, Commonwealth Governors-General received briefings from William's office, and by midday, palace switchboards had logged thousands of calls. Outside Kensington Palace, journalists were already in position. Some had been there since dawn, tipped off that something significant was coming, though none expected this scale. A palace staffer even described it as a rupture of historic proportions, not just within a family, but within British society as a whole. William also ordered the palace to activate a response. Plans like this take a long time to make. Interestingly, a former palace staff even confirmed that such scenarios are usually years in the making. However, what made this moment stand out was not even the noise, but certainty. The bombshell. December 2025, a date that will be forever marked in royal history. Not for a celebration, not for a jubilee, but for the day Princess Anne finally said, "Enough is enough." The setting was deliberate. Not Buckingham Palace, not Windsor Castle, but Gatcombe Park, Anne's private residence, her sanctuary, the one place where she answers to no one. This wasn't an official royal statement. Coordinating media strategies and building an insurance policy against the instituto that both felt had betrayed them. Now ask yourself, why would Princess Anne risk her reputation, built on decades of steadfast service, to expose this? Of carefully selected journalists, her face showing the strain of someone who's carried a terrible secret for far too long. Her hands, usually so steady, trembling slightly as she held her prepared notes. Her voice. Anne revealed that she had discovered communications, encrypted messages, phone records, documented meetings, proving that Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew. But what I have discovered goes beyond family squabbles. It goes beyond personal grievances. This is about the integrity of the crown itself. Can you imagine the shock in that room? Leverage against the royal family. Think about that for a moment. Meghan, who married into the family in 2018 and departed in 2020, supposedly seeking privacy and peace. Andrew, who was forced to step back from royal duties, had been coordinating their actions for years. Not months, years. A secret alliance forged in the shadows, maintained through deception and designed with one purpose. After his catastrophic BBC interview about Jeffrey Epstein, two people who publicly have nothing in common. But according to Princess Anne, they've been working together since late 2019, sharing insider information. Voice, typically firm and unwavering, carrying an edge that those present described as barely controlled fury. "I have remained silent," she began, "because I believed in the institution. I believed in family loyalty. I believed that some matters should be handled privately." Princess Anne doesn't do drama. She doesn't seek attention. She shows up, does her duty, and goes home. For her to call a press conference? Alarm bells should be ringing in your head right now. But here's where it gets absolutely chilling. This wasn't vetted by palace communications teams. This was Anne speaking as herself, Consequences be damned. And what she revealed was nothing short of devastating. Picture this. Princess Anne standing before a modest gathering. What could she have seen that was so dangerous she had no choice but to go nuclear? The answer, as we're about to discover, is even more disturbing than you can imagine. Legal analysts discussed the implications for titles, funding, and representation, careful not to speculate beyond what the statement allowed. The line had been drawn, and if you found this analysis valuable, subscribe for more in-depth coverage of this developing story. Because I promise you, this isn't over. This is just beginning. The question now isn't whether this scandal will be forgotten. It's whether the institution can survive what comes next. What do you think? Drop your thoughts in the comments. The royal family cannot continue as it has. Something must change. Either meaningful reforms that create real accountability and transparency, or a continued erosion of public support. Who was consulted, and how long it had been coming? Stick around, because you are about to find out what triggered William. Whether you sympathize with Meghan, or with Andrew, or with neither, Princess Anne's revelation demands a reckoning. But its shadow stretched forward. As the day moved on, people's attention slowly began to drift toward the reason behind William's action. People wanted to understand how such a decision was prepared that eventually makes the institution unsustainable. Princess Anne, the woman who never sought the spotlight, who dedicated her life to quiet service, has forced this moment of truth. And the monarchy will never be the same.